So let's talk about the international picture a little bit with the new Socialist Republic. You've made the point about internationalism, the whole world comes first. It's in your book Basics, from your talks and writings, quotations and essays. How does that apply in the new Socialist Republic?
Look, there are a number of contradictions that the new communism is setting out to deal with in a way that's beyond the way these contradictions have been dealt with in past communist revolutions and socialist societies. And, I think this is very important to understand. One of these contradictions I referred to, which is how do you advance toward communism on the basis of the masses of people moving to do that through all the different contradictions and ebbs and flows of the process without, as I put it, metaphorically, putting guns at the backs of the mass of people and, in any case, force marching them to communism, which you cannot do and will not work and will actually lead to a revolt against you and will actually lead back to capitalism or feed the forces seeking to go back to capitalism. So that's one contradiction that the new communism is consciously setting out to deal with, or that I've set out to deal with in the new communism, which is actually leading masses of people through all the contradictions and difficulties to advance on the road to uprooting and overcoming all these exploitative and oppressive relations and advancing to communism without, force marching the people to do it. Or another way to put it is, how do you do that without turning out the lights intellectually and culturally? And that relates to another very profound contradiction of transforming the world in the direction of communism and transforming particular countries on the road to communism as part of an overall international or world process. And that is, how do you orient your society to actually, including the economy in particular as the foundation of everything, how do you orient it toward meeting the fundamental needs of the masses of people, in particular their basic material needs on an expanding basis, as well as their intellectual and cultural needs, without, once again, turning out the lights, without, not providing for or even suppressing intellectual and cultural ferment, dissent, and so on. This is another contradiction that the new communism is dealing with in a completely different way, on a completely different level than it's been dealt with in the past. Now, another dimension, to get back directly to your question, is the international dimension. How do you handle the contradiction between the things I've been talking about, meeting the needs of the people, transforming the particular country on the road of socialism toward the final goal of communism in the world, with everything that's involved in that I've been just touching on, while at the same time being oriented fundamentally toward advancing the struggle of people worldwide toward the same goal. And that can be a very acute contradiction, both materially in terms of look, there you have, at any given time, you only have so many resources. And you're having a struggle about how you're going to utilize those resources in an exploitive way or in a way that does away with exploitation. How are you going to utilize those resources in a way that's liberating, at the same time meeting the needs of the people and within the country, and materially as well as politically supporting revolutionary struggles around the world? That's another acute contradiction. And then it can become even more acute if these imperialist countries around the world, as they will move in various ways to try to suffocate, strangle, and actually attack and overthrow your new socialist system. And so therefore you have to provide for the defense of your new socialist system against forces not only within the country but surrounding the country at any given time who want to defeat and destroy what you're working to build. So how do you handle the contradiction between that and actually supporting revolution in the world materially, as well as, in terms of, culturally, politically, and so on? So, all these are dealt with in a different way by the new communism. Not saying, oh, well, let's just do everything for the world revolution, and we don't, so what if people can't go hungry here in this country, or they have no shoes for their children? No, you have to pay attention to those needs as a very basic question, but you have to figure out how to handle the contradiction so at the same time you're increasingly able to give material as well as political support to the revolution in the world as a whole, because you recognize that ultimately, not in any, immediate terms, but ultimately, you have to advance to communism on a world level. And, you cannot just be an island of socialism within a sea of capitalism, imperialism over any long-term, period of time. So even on those terms, as well as the fact that, as you referred to, humanity comes first. That's our basic orientation. There's nothing special or specially good or God-favored or whatever by the people in this country or any other. We're all human beings, and that's the most fundamental identity we have, with all the other things that are very real in terms of oppressive relations. The most fundamental identity we have is as human beings, and we share a common fate as human beings, one way or another. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, even under the auspices of this system, you'll see astronauts and others who go into space and they look at the Earth from the space. And, I've read recently, one of them said the idea of the different countries and, and borders, which are I mean, he didn't go this far, but the idea of different countries seems ridiculous when you look at the Earth from space and see it as one thing, And the idea that you have all these barriers and borders and armies, and to enforce all these divisions, and you have people who are declared illegal if they go from one country, one part of that world to another. You step back and you can get the same view as those astronauts and people in space get. This is all one world and one humanity. And even though we have to proceed through different countries and different societies on the road to achieving communism on a world level, to keep in mind that fundamental picture of, the unity of humanity ultimately. And, you can see the unity concretely expressed. People do, come from different parts of the world to other parts of the world all the time. They're always bragging, the ruling class in the country, this is a country of immigrants. Now we got a fascist regime that says we got to get rid of all these so-called illegal immigrants. And, and of course they're going to sweep up, if they have their way, they'll sweep up a lot of legal ones too, even according to the restricted notions of the law. So, this is a fundamental point of orientation of, we are going for the emancipation of humanity as a whole, because that's the way that everyone can get emancipated and no other way ultimately. And because we all share that fundamental identity, if you will, or that fundamental reality of being human beings on one planet.